Hello, everyone. We're back today with another podcast episode. Me and Jacob. Today, we thought we'd have a little chat about AI. Me and Jacob talk about AI quite a bit, and we saw something quite funny in the week. But before we get into that, Jacob, how you doing, mate? It's been a little while since we last spoke.
It has, mate. It has. I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, cracking on, doing what I can on the content and copy side of things. As you said, AI is always at the front of our mind in any conversation these days related to creative output. But the thing you tagged me in the other day, I thought really merited further discussion, and it was kind of a hilarious but also kind of sobering reality of the direction of travel which AI is heading in
Yeah.
these days, and that is on LinkedIn. People using comment bots to automate comments on sort of well-known kind of LinkedIn personalities' posts and content to sort of elevate their own presence on the site, because LinkedIn is still a really powerful tool for building organic reach. It rewards organic activity like comments and shares and so on much more richly than the likes of Facebook and Instagram and so on, who are now
Mm.
really competing hard for advertising dollars.
It's
And
also
LinkedIn,
it's also the appropriate platform for corporate business as well, which is why it's
and
which is why
it's the only
it's
platform in a way.
yeah, exactly. Which is why what we saw is quite damning. What I'm going to do is I'll pull that up on screen right now so people can see what we were looking at. But can you just describe what we're looking at for people?
Sure. So this is happening, across LinkedIn as far as I can see. But this one creator in particular, a guy called Justin Welsh, who is a very famous sort of marketing expert, I believe, and published author and all the rest of it. On whose comments on whose posts, sorry, gets a lot of comments from people looking to boost their own visibility and add something to the discussion and so on. And what Justin identified was that a huge proportion of the comments he was receiving on his posts were very obviously generated by some sort of AI-driven plugin, which was basically automating comments from people's profiles. So I've not I've not explored the use of one of these plugins myself for obvious reasons. I think it's extremely disingenuous to do so, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But what I gather is that it's a Chrome plugin or something which allows you to simply click a button, and this thing will generate a comment for you based on the content of the post. And so what Justin noticed was that all of these comments were identically structured and saying exactly the same thing along,
Yeah.
some kind of cheesy, vague, wishy-washy, generic kind of well, it wasn't opinion at all. Along the lines of, great post, Justin. This is a really useful insight into blank,
Yeah.
just
What was it?
completely devoid,
What was it
just
you? What
devoid
was it?
and bereft of any insight or opinion or value whatsoever.
What was it you called it? Was it an echo chamber of excrement?
It was an echo chamber of excrement. Yeah, it was quite
Love
right.
it.
And so
I like
I'm
that.
really
I
glad you
like
brought
that.
it to my attention. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought it to my attention because I think it merits. I mean, it's a very small piece of what's happening in the wider AI pie right now,
Mhm.
if you like. This is a very small kind of way to execute sort of content and interaction with AI tools, but it speaks, I think, to a much wider malaise of what is potentially happening within the industry as far as people using these tools is concerned, and that is, it's one thing to use AI to generate functional or technical content. As a copywriter, I've used AI myself, actually quite extensively, not to submit any final output, of course, but at least to help structure articles or blogs or frameworks, particularly when I'm writing about topics which don't have a huge amount of room for maneuver. For example, I had an insurance client last year, and part of my remit was to write a monthly blog discussing the different types of insurance, like what health insurance versus life insurance and so on. Now, there isn't much room to play with there, and so
Yeah.
in that instance, using AI was actually a really useful tool to get the article started. It saved me hours of research. But of course, I went through it and I confirmed the points it was making with a lot less research required, and edited it, of course, and put it into the appropriate brand voice and switched it up. I didn't just copy and paste from ChatGPT. So using AI can be a really useful tool in that respect. But I think when it comes to engaging with communities or looking to kind of elevate your profile by using AI to engage with platforms such as LinkedIn, it really just looks cheap. I
Yeah.
think like I said, it's bereft of any kind of actual opinion, and I think it's just quite rude. And maybe this
Yeah.
is me being a bit sensitive, but I don't think so because I read a really interesting, I think it was a tweet actually, or some piece of commentary, just a short line about the use of AI, and the takeaway was, why should I be bothered to read something which no one could be bothered to write? And so that speaks to the fact that people are just churning out volumes of AI driven content without bothering to see whether it's relevant or even accurate. A lot of the time people are just focusing on the cheap or free and fast aspect of it without really stopping to check if it's any good.
Yeah.
And I think when using AI tools to leave comments which are meant to be of a personal nature, and ultimately for your benefit, you leave comments on LinkedIn, yes, to add to the conversation, but also because then your profile shows up under a famous creator's posts, and that massively increases your visibility and your reach.
Hmm.
And I think not even bothering to add your own opinion to the discussion, not even bothering to stop for 5 minutes and think what you could add on a personal level that's relevant to your experience, or maybe you have other questions or whatever it might be, but just the complete lack of personality
Yeah.
within this type of engagement just cheapens the entire exercise. And
It,
I think there's something quite insidious about it,
yeah.
really.
I think like, and it does speak to a culture that exists within business anyway. That's probably the less attractive side of business, which is this sort of like, it's probably a bit strong, but almost this sort of weaponization of flattery, where it's like I'm just writing something so that I'm on your radar, and so that you think I like what you do. But all this results in is like a lack of understanding of between the two people, which means if you ever do business together, like it's not going to be an authentic engagement. You're probably not going to actually gel that well. You might not be able to meet their requirements. They might not be able to meet your requirements, and that's on both ends. And I think it just creates this situation where you're not building authentic mutual understanding, authentic relationships, and that's how business works. That's how real good business is done. Yeah,
Precisely that. Precisely that. You're so true. Yeah, from the very get go, you're basing your potential relationship with this person, or even if it's just a back and forth short conversation, you're basing that from the very beginning on something which is completely inauthentic. It is not genuine. It is not original. Honestly, the the just the way that it looks, as you scroll down through these dozens of comments which are all identical, and it's like an army of bots, except these are coming from what I can see, at least, real profiles, people with some of them with fairly with job titles of fairly high distinction in their profiles and whatnot. You've got sales directors, you've got senior managers, and so on, just quite clearly taking no more than 3 seconds out of their day to hit, some little generate comment for me, or whatever the call to action on that bot may be,
yeah,
to kind of hit some kind of vanity metric, and shamefully and entirely selfishly, in my opinion, look to boost their own profile, visibility, engagement, whatever, without a semblance of authentic or original thought. And as you
yeah.
say, that is the only way that effective and long-lasting business, I think, can and should be done.
So, mate, no, I completely agree with everything you've just said, which leads us to if you go along the logical train of thought, you then sort of think, okay, so what's the bigger picture with AI content? That's one example with people using these chatbots to comment, to kind of boost their kind of, I guess, like credit score on LinkedIn almost, to try and get themselves out there a bit more, and to try and create some kind of relationship with people without actually having to put any thought or effort into it. But where does AI sit in a more general sense with content? I mean, I think that because I think that obviously we can speak slightly differently to this. You can speak to it in terms of copy. I can speak to it in terms of video. But more generally speaking, I think just to round off that conversation we just had, I said this to you the other day when we were originally talking about that post, which is, and I think I try not to use online dating as like a comparison point for anything really, because it's a bit of a strange thing, but I think it's a good one because it's all about human conversations, human interactions. But there's this sort of concept known as catfishing, and not to use it in the most aggressive term, but to kind of what it represents, which is someone representing something or someone which they are not actually. And that's essentially what we've got here. And I don't see why
I think that's a pretty
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
completely
think
agree.
I think
I think that's a pretty.
yeah, a business relationship is as much of a human engagement as a date is in many ways, although hopefully less intimate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a pretty fair assessment, and basically, you're absolutely right. Using AI to build and nurture these relationships, even nurture might be a bit strong. How could you possibly nurture something with a tool which has no human emotion?
Yeah,
So using AI to build these conversations, or to at least attempt to start these conversations, is like going online dating with a fake profile. You
yeah,
know, and where would we be for if, for example, like you used an AI plugin to comment on someone's LinkedIn post, and then they used an AI plugin to comment on your comment? Then you would just get
mm,
into sucked into this vortex of banality and nothingness, I suppose. Which
yeah.
is not delivering or creating any value for anybody in that
No,
conversation.
no,
It's purely for show.
yeah. I think if you, because I always like to try and put my mind in the heads of the people that are doing this stuff, that are creating AI, that are creating these facilities, and I suppose their retort would probably be, okay, fair enough. At the minute, it's pretty basic. There is a lot of repetition, but let's say in a year, 2 years down the line, we're going to be able to have a great amount of variety. You're going to be able to adapt your voice. It's going to be able to speak almost as if it's you. But my retort to that would be, is that a good thing? Because I understand, I understand the impact of that. I understand the effect of that. I understand that people are going to do it. But the point is that ethical and is that effective and impactful? I was looking at a study recently. It was from, I sent it over to you. It was with research.mountain.com, which is MNTN Research. And I was looking at some of this study they'd done on how consumers are receiving AI at the minute, and it found that the overall point they've made is consumers aren't as thrilled as advertisers with generative AI, which is interesting. And it says that whilst 78% of consumers believe that generative AI is the future, only 39% are actually excited about that future. And that same 78% of consumers want brands to be transparent when they're using AI. And I think that's quite telling. It shows that there is an acceptance that this is going to become part of our culture forever as people in society and when we're being marketed to. But the fact that people want a company to be transparent about when they're using AI just shows you they don't want to be duped. They don't want they don't want to think it's something it's not. And that speaks to the fact that we care whether we're actually hearing from a person or whether we're hearing from a robot, an artificial intelligence, something that's not another person. And there's something so sort of intense and traumatizing about like thinking you're developing a relationship and a connection with someone, as I'm imagining right now, the future, where I think I'm developing a relationship with someone, doing good business with, because a lot of business is about friendship, it is about relationships, and it is about,
Of course, yeah.
feeling like you're achieving, feeling like
Even
you're
in B
achieving
two
things
B.
together.
Sorry.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like you're achieving things together. I'd say especially in B2B.
Yeah.
And
Actually, even
and
more
if
so.
and can you imagine getting down the line and finding out you're actually chatting with a robot? Like what an empty feeling that would be. But yeah, the point is that, and I've said this many times, and I it's a bit academic and it's not necessarily like the most accessible terminology to use. But when I did my master's degree, we talked about postmodern marketing and how in this postmodern society we live in, there's this idea that there's a distrust of authority. And so when you have a distrust of authority, anything that resembles that, people aren't going to respond to it the same way. Of course, there's always a place for it. There's always, you said a really good phrase the other day. It was functionality versus personality, I think was what you said. And it's such a good phrase. Was that how you put it to me?
So it was actually no. You've gone and made it better. I
Oh,
think so.
good.
I think mine
Good.
was along the lines of functionality versus emotion,
Yeah. Okay.
or
Well, it's because it's got the utty at the end. It sounds better. But
yeah,
but
exactly.
the but the point of that is that me and Jacob both understand, because we've spoken about this at length, that like AI is going to have a place, but what is its place? What are the limits for it? Where should we say, okay, that's where it actually adds value, that's where it improves things, and that is where we need to do more to communicate who we are as people, who we are as an organization. I think I can speak to that from
Completely agree.
video. I'll go on with video a little bit, because for me, I think my whole thing is storytelling. My storytelling content is what's got me the most views in any field I've worked in. Corporates are often reluctant to do personal storytelling content. I understand that, because there could be mistakes can be made. You could be misrepresented. It's much easier to cross certain lines and get things slightly wrong, go off the messaging, all that kind of thing. If you're working with me, you won't do that. But anyway, that's another point. But the storytelling content I've done has always been the best. And when I've worked on Instagram, for example, the reels I've made that are little mini documentaries, little stories that you do in a minute and a half, the numbers on them are crazy. And it's because people connect with them, they relate to them, they grow to support you, they feel that human experience, you know, and that's what they want. They want to hear and they want to feel that, and that is ultimately the best way to push anything you're doing, because then they care about you on a human level. And so I think that for me, the way I see AI fitting is an amazing replacement for stock footage. I know it's going to upset a lot of people, because there are people that make a good living out of going out shooting things and uploading it to these stock footage databases. And there will always be a place for stock footage, because there's some things that just, you want to see what the real thing looked like. You know, you want to see the Aurora Borealis or whatever when it happened in real time. You want to see that moment, the people's genuine reactions, all that kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure, and I know that AI will be in a place soon where it can replicate that. But again, I want to see real people having real reactions. I don't want AI to dupe me into thinking these are people that this is how they actually reacted, rather than how a machine anticipated they would react. Because I think the subversion of life that happens in everyday society of humanity is what actually makes us great as people. Like, you know, the diversity of experience, the diversity of reaction, you know, and for that to be authentic is key. So for me, where AI comes in, and the way I'm really excited to use it, and looking at Sora and seeing, with coming from OpenAI, the chat GPT people, seeing that stuff and the quality of that, I'm like, wow. Imagine taking like a real person, doing a real interview, talking about their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings, their story, and being able to create a visual experience to go alongside that using AI that doesn't require $1 million budget to go out and shoot it and create it. So for me, I can see that being an amazingly powerful tool, because it's very clear then you're like, this is a real person, this is their real story, and this visual, this supporting AI video is just taking me on a visual journey that just makes me experience it on a deeper level. And I personally think that's great, and I don't have a problem with that, and I'm excited to use that. But I still think there needs to be real humans telling real stories, putting out real messages. I think that's so important. And yeah, I think a good example of all of this, I think where AI content can never win out, will never replace, is in live sports, and that's because you look at live sport and you go, that's real people playing a real game with a real result. It's not fake. There's nothing fake about it. It's like a pure human experience. AI can't replicate any of that, because it can make it look like it, but it wasn't it. There was no real work from real people that went into what we're seeing when AI produces content. I mean, and that's the point.
Even statistically,
that's exactly what we're saying. Yeah.
Even in the world of statistics, for example, you know, you get all these, you know, you get like Opta Joe and so on, you know, who I'm sure you're familiar with, like the data analysis company, and they can run as,
you know, I love my football.
And I do, to my chagrin, but they can run as many simulations before a Champions League final as they want, you know, and they can predict goals per game and assists per game, and these feed into sort of the betting markets as well, and it's all, you know, extremely data driven game, but they can never replicate, or they can never even think about replicating, you know, the experience on the pitch, the experience in the stands, the very human, the very raw, the very, you know, exciting, emotional side of being at the game itself, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I just came up with that just now, but I think it's a pretty good analogy. But please, thank you. But if you would, if you could go into a little bit of it with content writing and how you see it fitting in your world, if it does indeed fit.
Sure. I mean, there's a huge crossover with everything you just said. In fact, I'm going to be going back and stealing a few of your lines from just then. But the key, as with anything, is always going to be connection, authenticity, relatability, and so on. Right? Like we could go down a really philosophical style, you know, route with this conversation, but fundamentally, what we are looking for, or what the vast majority of humans are looking for and seeking, is connection and genuine connection. That, you know, we talk about kindred spirits and soulmates and things like that. And while those all sound a bit, you know, dramatic and love novelty, the reality is that we are still seeking for, you know, we are still seeking relatability and authentic connection and so on. Those words have been especially authentic. It's been overdone a lot in the content writing world recently, but it's there for a reason, you know. And I think, like I alluded to just earlier, AI has emerged as a really useful tool, which saves, just as you could save hours of editing, and animators will save hours of animating and so on, which is a really time intensive process. On the animation side and so on, as I'm sure you know. Much like that, AI has emerged as a tool which allows us to save a lot of time and research hours when it comes to technical and functional content. And that's just not limited to content marketing. You know, it has huge application in legalese, you know, like in analyzing reams of legal text and so on, and then you expand that across into all sorts of industries, healthcare, manufacturing, all the rest of it. Anything, technical documentation,
Anything
AI
process
has
driven. Yeah.
anything process driven. Exactly that. AI has a huge role to play. But by definition, right, artificial intelligence cannot have emotion. It can never truly understand the human experience. It can only it's only as good as what it's been trained on.
Yeah.
Right. And some of what it's trained on will be the human experience. Maybe it's passing information from novels and blogs as well as technical information too. So if you ask it to replicate something which is intrinsic. Yeah, if you ask it to replicate something which is intrinsically human, there's a really good example by an excellent copywriter called Eddie Schleiner, who writes about the birth of his firstborn child. And he asked ChatGPT to write 100 words about the birth of its firstborn child, and it wrote, it was in perfect English, but that was about as good as it got, because the AI spat out like a very generic kind of paragraph about meeting my firstborn child was the most enlightening experience of my life. It was very emotional, and so it read like a child's storybook at best. It covered all of the bases, and then Eddie sort of tested himself and gave himself the same word limit and wrote his own experience about the birth of his firstborn child, and it was a real real heartstring puller, that one.
Yeah.
Incredibly poignant, very profound, and genuinely very emotional. And that is what AI, as even I think in years to come, as advanced as it gets, I just don't think it will never be by design able to replicate it. It may be able to, it will no doubt improve its parameters. It will gather from data from much wider sources. It will be able to interpret different inputs. It will be able to look at videos and so on. So rather than being trained on text-based data, it may be able to look at videos and see how. Maybe even one day it's going to be trained on this. We never know what data it has access to. So it may be better able to predict and analyze and all the rest of it, but it will never be able to really truly replicate or reproduce what the human experience looks, sounds, and feels like.
And even if it can, it doesn't matter, because it's still not the actual experience that an actual person had, and that's the point. Like, I know that I can read something. I could write right now what I think it'll be like to have my first child if and when I eventually get to that. But I'm sure it's going to look completely different when it actually happens. And guess what? AI can't have children, so that's it.
Precisely.
Well, not yet. Not yet, anyway.
And so I think that and then that comes back to the kind of the beginning of this conversation, if you like, and and what it's being used for, and the ethics around using it. I mean, not just the ethics of data and data privacy. That's a whole other conversation, because a lot of creators are rightly, I think, getting quite anxious about, especially artists. They're getting very anxious about the. Yes, exactly, about the access that these tools have to their data and the privacy they're in. So this is the ethics, not in that respect, but more so the ethics of using these tools as relationship builders and as sale, or even as kind of lead generators, as it were. Like, I think you look at the concept of writing a sales email, for example, which is something which I'm sure a lot of marketing teams are doing, having gleefully fired their copywriter to save a bit of cash, and then now turning to ChatGPT to churn out just relentless volume of sales emails to go out to their database. Again, it's incredibly disingenuous, because a sale is based on trust and authenticity and relationships and all the rest of it. Like there is a time and a place for volumes of content and so on, and functional content.
Exactly. Just to touch on that, because I wanted to talk to you about that functional point really quickly, because I completely accept and acknowledge this is AI is great for that kind of content. I'm never going to say it's not. It's really good. It can replace a lot of what people do in that world, and that is because it is a heavily process driven thing when you create like a more functional piece of content like that. And it's just about we need to make a new logo, we need to put out an infographic or whatever it is. It's something like, it's literally what you said before, Jake. It's that ability to pull information into one place and then put it out. And the fact is that AI is great for that. And if information is all you need to present, that's great and that's fine. And sometimes when you're a big brand, sometimes all you need to do is play it safe. And I completely accept that. And I accept that AI can do that when it comes to things like graphics, videos, things like that. If you
Yeah,
just want to play it
completely.
real clean, real safe. But if you actually want to create more of a relationship with your consumers, and you actually want to, create that story of your business and all that kind of stuff, all the stuff we've just spoken about that makes, basically what we're talking about is what makes great content, what makes great organic content. How do you build trust? How do you build authority? And how do you maintain it? More importantly, when you're a big organization, because at the end of the day, like, you can lose that spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you
that's
should.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, what you should be doing is exactly as you point out. Like, by all means, save your save hours coming up with infographics and functional material as such. Use that time to build to humanize your relationships and so on.
Exactly.
Save your marketing team valuable hours, and put them to work, doing genuinely kind of revenue, quality, value-driven, revenue-generating kind of activities. It's worth noting also, actually, in Google's recent update. So this was in September 2023. They launched what they called a helpful content update, and originally in the kind of the TNCs or the summary of this kind of update, they said that Google is now going to be focusing on content written by people for people. With helpful, reliable information. Actually, they removed the written by people pretty swiftly, which a lot of people took to mean, okay, so AI content isn't going to be penalized. Fine, sure, because a lot of people are using, obviously, AI to kind of automate their blog writing and so on and so forth, which, again, like I alluded to with my insurance client, like, the content it's going to give you is likely at least going to be accurate. Of course, you've got to check it, but it's going to be there. But if you're copying and pasting it onto your site, that's not nearly going to be enough. But a lot of people are not coming to terms with that. But the key and the point I'm making here is that in Google's update, they prioritizing content that is written for people. And this is based on the parameters of EEAT: experience, exercise, authority, and trust. Experience, expertise, authority, and trust. Sorry. So like you just alluded to there, like building authority and building trust are absolutely key. And AI doesn't have experience. By design. Again, it cannot.
Yeah.
AI doesn't have what you classify as expertise. It just understands the prompt you're giving it to recall some information. It's not an expert in anything. It doesn't have experience in anything. It doesn't have any authority either, because it's just spitting out instantaneously what you've prompted it to give you back. It's not an authority on anything. It's just passing information from what it's already been trained on. And trust, well, I mean, this is where we started this conversation. If you're using AI to build genuine human connection, or to pretend to build genuine human connection with someone, then there's no trust there whatsoever. And so what brands, businesses, entrepreneurs, anybody has to do who is thinking about using AI content to help them in their marketing efforts or sales efforts or whatever it might be, by all means, use the tools at your disposal. Save the hours that you've been slaving away on to create these infographics and whatever else it might be. But use that time wisely then to really craft your message, humanize your message, personalize your content. Do what AI cannot, and that is be human, be real, be relatable, and bring your worldly experience to the fore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
there's absolutely room for it, and I've been I've been grateful to it because a lot of the talk in the copywriting bubble, for example, is how much everyone hates ChatGPT because it's just not very good at writing taglines, and there's just and I've called it out before on my LinkedIn statuses. It's just a bit of fun, but because it isn't necessarily creative. It can't be, because it hasn't got the human experience, which is what creativity really comes down to. So there's a lot of talk in the copywriting community, and I'm sure maybe in the video community as well, about kind of disowning the idea of AI and getting angry at its relentless march towards towards every corner of the industry. But we're not going to stop that march, So if you can't beat it, well, don't join it, but at least be okay with working with it. It saved me hours
for sure.
But what I've never lost sight of.
What you've never lost sight of.
Well, sorry, what I've never lost sight of is the absolute need, like the critical urgency to take whatever it gives you, this functional technical stuff, and make it yours. Put it in your, put it in. You should spend, a good amount of the time that you saved researching, let's say, you should spend that time editing what it gives you. Not just checking it for accuracy, but also making sure that it's in your brand voice and it's unequivocally yours. So that then the AI content isn't so much just AI generated content, it's actually just it's just research-based information that you would have got from
Yeah.
Google at some point anyway. Chat's just saved you hours on the journey. But by the time you submit your final output or you publish your final piece or whatever it might be, you have to have crafted it in your style. Otherwise, we're just in this echo chamber, this vacuum, this spiraling vortex down into the black doom of, you know, AI, AI, everything. Because it can only learn from itself, and if everything on the web becomes AI, then it starts to learn from that. Then who knows what that might look like?
I think the echo chamber of excrement is probably a great title for this episode.
I think we should put that as the title for the entire podcast.
Yeah, I think people might get the wrong idea about us then. Yeah, no, and just I think like what we've said all along, innovation is inevitable. We both fully accept the way the world's going. I think it's just understanding where it's most useful in its rightful place and not using it to perform tasks that are for humans, and that that's just it basically. And I think if you do continue down this road of replacing people with AI when it comes to marketing, I just don't see a world in which that marketplace actually works because everyone knows what they're looking at then. Like
Yeah, completely. Where do you stand out? Have you seen the Incredibles film? One of my favorite
yeah,
Pixar movies,
the
actually.
first one, yeah.
The first one, yeah. The second one's not nearly as good, but the first one's
Haven't seen
excellent,
it. Yeah,
stunning cinema. But one of the lines in there is, they were talking about being superheroes and but having to hide their powers and whatnot. But one of the lines is saying, "Well, when everyone's special, no one will be." And when everyone's using AI, well, then no one's standing out as doing so. Like it becomes a race to the bottom very quickly, because then you get sucked into this relentless back and forth of empty, vacuous content, which again has no value, has no personal touch, and it's what it all comes down to, at least in the world of business and commerce and capitalism, if you like. Like business relationships, sales are all based on connection. It's not
yeah.
what you know; it's who you know. How
Yeah.
long have we been saying that?
Too long,
And suddenly,
Jacob. Too long.
too long. But suddenly, if it turns out if who you know is in fact a robot, I, I just don't see how that sustains.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think that's a good point to wrap this up. I think just before we go quickly, in case you're wondering how you could do your organic non-AI content better, what you've just watched is a podcast by me and Jacob, or you may have seen one of our clips, and this is the solution that we've put together. Where we get you to have these conversations with relevant people. It might be for lead generation, it might just be to communicate your messaging as a business. And we record this HD podcast, we make the clips for you. And I know one of the big things with AI is it saves money and it saves time. Number one, we're very fast. Number two, we're very affordable. So if anybody wants to look at doing this as part of their marketing for their company, please do get in touch with either myself or Jacob. And I hope that you've enjoyed this little ramble from us. Jacob, any final thoughts?
I certainly enjoyed my ranting and raving as always. Thank you, Harry, as
You
always,
did
for
go on a
having me
bit
on.
today. You did go on a bit today.
What can I say? I think we could have gone on for another couple of hours and more besides. AI is the hottest topic since the internet kind of emerged onto the scene. It's a truly, and I'm borrowing from kind of predictable kind of corporate speak right now, but it is a truly transformative kind of technology. And it has significant positive and negative implications for kind of every facet of business across every industry. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. I've been working with a couple of tech clients who are applying it to their healthcare clients, financial services clients, across the entire spectrum. And it's really, really interesting. But the key point being, we can never lose sight of the need for the human touch in all of this.
100%. Yeah, mate. All right. Well, look, it was really good chatting. Well, I think we're aiming to do one of these a month, but maybe more if the time is there. But we're both very, very busy right now. But yeah, mate, it was great chatting, and we'll catch up again soon for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Have a good one, mate. Bye.